Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Good evening. Yeah.
Hi
Yes.
Mohammed. Hi William, how are
Hi,
you?
how are you? Fine, fine. Good
Thanks, sorry to keep
evening,
you waiting.
Professor Shabas.
Mohammed, are you happy for me just to crack on with things?
Yes.
Fine, excellent. Well, good evening everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Rhys Davis. I'm a barrister at Temple Garden Chambers based here in London. We're meeting this evening to discuss the recent submissions filed by William Shabas in relation to the incursions at the Al-Aqsa mosque. I understand, William, you correct me if I misstate this, I understand that submissions have been filed today at the International Criminal Court. The plan for can I ask everyone just to mute their microphones unless they're speaking for the time being, please? I can see one microphone that's on. There's a bit of background noise. Spectrum of speakers this evening. We're going to begin in a few moments' time with Mohammed Jamil, the director of the AOHR. William Shabas will be speaking to us as well. I believe also we have Ekrima Sabri, Salima Yembu, as well as I think Peter Galbraith and Michael Link all joining us this evening. We're going to be speaking for about half an hour, 40 minutes. We've got quite a few speakers and quite a tight timetable, so each speaker will be speaking for about 5 or 10 minutes. I'm not going to spend any time addressing you about the underlying submissions because you will hear it from the horse's mouth, as it were, from Professor Shabas in a few moments' time. But before we do that, let me just first of all ask Mohammed Jamil, the esteemed director of the Arab Organization for Human Rights in the UK, to address us for a few moments and make an opening statement. So Mohammed, if I can pass over to you, please.
Thank you, Ray. I welcome you this evening, speakers and guests, to discuss an important and timely case, which is the attacks on Al-Aqsa Mosque and the worshippers. The attacks were the subject of a complaint submitted this morning by a legal team headed by Professor Shabas to the Office of the Public Prosecutor at the International Criminal Court. The complaint was submitted after decades of various crimes being committed in Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa Mosque at the hands of the Israeli occupation, which has never been held accountable for any crimes. Successive Israeli governments, right and left, have been issuing decisions for daily incursions of Al-Aqsa Mosque, and it has been taking place under the protection of the army and the police. These incursions also included attacks on worshippers, preventing them from praying, banishing them from Al-Aqsa Mosque, and firing live bullets and gas at them. The complaint pointed out the temple groups movement is growing in numbers where dozens of organizations joined under its umbrella. This movement is financed and support at various political, security, and military levels. After the recent elections and the formation of a government led by Netanyahu, there are concerns over escalation of attacks on Al-Aqsa Mosque. From now, calling for gathering to storm Al-Aqsa Mosque on 18th December on the so-called Hanukkah holiday have begun and will continue to increase every day. In response to these calls, Palestinians have called for prayers to continue taking place inside Al-Aqsa Mosque in order to protect it in anticipation of anything that could harm the mosque. The Palestinian people are furious over the double standards policy of the USA and the West in dealing with the human rights violations, where Israelis who committed crimes enjoy absolute impunity, while others get sanctions, arrested, and prosecuted. The lack of action by international community and the lack of political will encourage the occupation forces to commit more crimes, knowing that its perpetrators are guaranteed impunity. Therefore, we repeat our calls to the public prosecutor of the ICC, who is the only possible means to achieve justice for the Palestinians, to take the necessary measures to investigate the cases submitted before him. Thank you. The mic to you, raised. Do you hear me?
I hear you, Mohammed. Thank you. Sorry, I was just desperately trying to press my unmute button. After years of using Zoom and Teams, we still managed to forget when these things are. Let me turn, if I may, please. Well, first of all, thank you, Mohammed. Thank you for that opening statement. Can I turn now to Professor William Shabbas? I suspect that you probably need no introduction to a lot of the people who are either watching this live or who will be watching this later when it's released. But just for completeness, by way of introduction, Professor Shabbas is a Professor of International Law at Middlesex University here in the UK. He's also a Professor of International Law and Human Rights at Leiden University, amongst his many academic positions. Professor Shabbas is a door tenant at 9 Bedford Row Chambers here in London, and in 2014 was appointed head of the UNHRC. By the head of the UNHRC to lead a 3-member group looking into alleged war crimes in Gaza. Professor Shabbas, you've drafted and submitted a complaint to the ICC. I believe that's been submitted today. Could you tell us what it's all about, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Riz. This morning, earlier today, I filed the submission with the Office of the Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. It's a submission that consists both of legal materials, which I developed for the Arab Organization for Human Rights in the UK, and a collection of factual material as well. It's about 40 pages in length. It includes many references to videos that are available about the factual issues, also to various documents on the Al-Aqsa Mosque emanating from bodies like UNESCO and the United Nations General Assembly over a period of many years. And finally, it includes several eyewitness testimonies by victims. That we have the summaries of the accounts, but the full depositions that they prepared have also been submitted to the Office of the Prosecutor. What the situation at the court is as follows. The prosecutor is already working on an active investigation into the situation, what's called the situation in the state of Palestine. This is a procedural step that's an important one. The situation in the state of Palestine is one of about 15 active situations that the prosecutor is working on, according to his own reports and information. So this is not a submission asking the prosecutor to begin an investigation, but rather insisting that the prosecutor examine the situation of the Al-Aqsa Mosque within the broader context of the situation in Palestine as a whole. Until 2 years ago, it was possible to know to have at least an idea of what the prosecutor was examining, because there were reports that were filed regularly. But the prosecutor has become more taciturn in the new prosecutor, Karim Khan, about exactly what he's working on, and he is not really very talkative about Palestine in particular. The state of Palestine made a submission to the International Criminal Court's Assembly of States Parties earlier this week. The Assembly of States Parties is the governing body. It meets every year for about a week and takes decisions on a range of issues. And this is when the prosecutor normally makes an annual report. States that are members of the court, like the state of Palestine, also often make statements. So the state of Palestine made a statement a few days ago in the Assembly of States Parties, protesting the fact that the situation in Palestine as a whole does not appear to be getting the attention that it should and that it warrants by the International Criminal Court, and that means by the prosecutor. So this is the situation that we're now confronting at the court. It's with Palestine at the International Criminal Court. It's been a case of one step forward and two steps back, or sometimes two steps forward and one step back. A big step forward was taken last year when the decision was taken to begin the investigation. But in fact, or a year and a half ago, I should say, when the decision was taken. But there has not been any visible progress in the investigation over the last year. So the material that I think we have brought to the investigation is extremely important because it deals with a facet of the whole spectrum of international crimes that has in the past received considerable attention from the Office of the Prosecutor and the court in general in other situations. For example, there was and continues to be considerable amount of activity with regard to the damage to religious buildings and attacks on religious observance in the state of Mali, dating from a period in 2012 when in the context of a civil conflict. So there's not a shortage of material from the prosecutor indicating an interest in dealing with this type of issue under the heading of crimes against humanity. And so these examples are brought out. They will demonstrate, I think, to the global public that there's nothing obscure or unusual about the court focusing its attention on attacks on religious buildings, on holy sites, and on those who worship at those holy sites. And what this submission does, amongst other things, is highlight the fact that the court should, in order to really demonstrate that it's not a court of double standards, treat these violations and abuses that are taking place in Jerusalem with regard to the holy sites in the same way that it's done with others. So this is ultimately the substance of the report. As I say, it's not to convince the prosecutor to begin the general investigation because that's has already been taken. That step has been taken. But it is important, I think, to signal that we are in a challenging period, not just about the Al-Aqsa Mosque at the International Criminal Court, but more generally about getting the attention of the new prosecutor I say new, he's been a prosecutor at the International Criminal Court for something more than a year, and he's well known to those of us in legal circles in the United Kingdom because he's a King's Counsel and a member of the bar of here in London. I'll stop there, Riz. I'm quite happy to answer questions.
Thanks, William. Well, can I just ask one very brief follow-up question before we move on for a moment? And what one often sees in cases that are brought before the ICC, not always, but from time to time, is that there's a degree of legal novelty that's deployed in order to bring a matter within the ICC's jurisdiction. But I think what you're really saying is that there's nothing novel about the approach that you've adopted because it's being used elsewhere. This is a question of really whether or not there's the will to bring it into the current investigation.
That's correct. That's correct. This is ground that's familiar to the prosecutor, and I think it was important in the submission to remind him of that, and also to point out because there is always a tendency, as you say, of people to think that perhaps there are some challenging legal issues that make it difficult to proceed. But this is one that is not only not challenging from a legal standpoint, but the violations and abuses are going on in plain sight, and the evidence of them is accessible. It's available on film, and those who are responsible for it are also quite brazen in the statements and the activities that they undertake. If they had studied the case law of the International Criminal Court, they would know that they are on thin ice in terms of what they're doing and their vulnerability to be charged. And I'm speaking both about those within the state of Israel, the officials who are condoning the behavior or inciting it or encouraging it, but also the private individuals and groups who are engaging in the various provocations and attacks that they are. It's important that they all know that even if we don't have a clear manifestation of the will of the prosecutor to proceed, that they are exposing themselves quite openly to vulnerability to prosecution for these crimes at the international level.
William, thanks for that. That's a fascinating overview into what I imagine will be a very interesting case if the prosecutor picks it up. Whether or not the prosecutor will, I suppose, is another matter, and I think we've got other commentators on the screen who'll be able to give us their thoughts on that in a few moments' time. I'm going to turn now to Ekrima Sabri, the former Grand Mufti of Jerusalem and Palestine from October 1994 up until July 2006. I'm conscious, I suspect, that his contribution will be given in Arabic today. So, Mohammed, I'm going to turn to you, please, and ask you to welcome Ekrima Sabri and ask him to give his contribution for a few moments' time.
شيخ عكرمة تسمعنا؟
نعم.
نرحب بك في هذه الندوة المهمة.
بارك الله.
ممكن تبدأ؟
نعم.
تفضل.
طريقة إنه كل فقرة ثم تترجم ولا كيف الطريقة؟
نعم، كل فقرة وتترجم المترجم.
أتوقف حتى تترجم.
نعم.
طيب، بارك الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بداية أشكر الفريق القانوني الدولي الذي يرعى ويدافع عن المسجد الأقصى المبارك ويدافع عن المصلين المسلمين في فلسطين. نعم.
Yeah.
So I'm going to translate the speech of Dr. Sheikh Ekrima Sabri. He is thanking the legal international team, which is defending Al-Aqsa Mosque, as well as the worshippers there.
وبصفتي خطيب للمسجد الأقصى المبارك منذ سنوات طوال كنا نتابع الاعتداءات التي تقوم بها سلطات الاحتلال ضد الأقصى وضد المصلين، ولكن مع الأسف لم يكن هناك أي تجاوب دولي لحماية الأقصى أو حماية المصلين. نعم.
دينا.
As a Grand Mufti for Jerusalem for a long time, I've been following the attacks on Al-Aqsa by the IOF Israeli occupation forces against the mosque and against worshippers as well. Unfortunately, no international solution or no international attention was given to the situation there.
وحينما ندرس القوانين الدولية سواء ما لها علاقة بالمحكمة الجنايات أو بغيرها، نجد أنها قوانين سليمة، قوانين قانونية، قوانين حضارية، لكن العبرة بالقوة التنفيذية التي هي بحاجة لها، أي أن القوانين الدولية التي هي نحن نفخر بها تحتاج إلى قوة دولية للتنفيذ. نعم.
When we study international law, whether the ICC law or other international laws, we find that it's legitimate and reasonable. However, the execution of these laws needs strength and a strong will of the international community to enforce it.
ما يحصل من جرائم دولية تحاول دول كبرى تعطل إقامة وصول هذه الشكاوى وهذه القضايا إلى محكمة الجنايات الدولية. نعم.
There are international crimes being committed. However, big states are trying to attempt to hinder the submission of these complaints that we have to the international, to the ICC.
وكثيرا سمعنا بأن السلطة الفلسطينية تريد اللجوء إلى محكمة الجنايات الدولية، ولكن نشعر ونعلم بأن هناك ضغط من أمريكا أو أي دولة أخرى على السلطة الفلسطينية فتتراجع، لذا يضيع الحق ولا أحد يدافع عن هؤلاء المواطنين، ولا أحد يكشف الجرائم التي يقوم بها الاحتلال. نعم.
We've heard many times that the Palestinian Authority wants to go to the ICC and submit complaints, but we feel that there are some strong pressures that stop it from going forward, and it always stops submitting its complaint. There is nobody that the pressure is practiced by big states, and there is no one that is trying to expose the crimes practiced against the Palestinians.
وعلى سبيل المثال ما حصل مع شيرين أبو عاقلة الصحفية التي قتلت بدم بارد، وأن الفيديو يؤكد بأنها قد قتلت من قبل الجيش الإسرائيلي، وأن الفيديو يؤكد بأن هذا لم يكن هناك أي مقاومة للاحتلال للتبرير. ومع ذلك فإن السلطات الفلسطينية كانت تريد أن تصل إلى المحكمة الجنايات، ولكن ضغط عليها فتراجعت، مما أدى إلى أن تضطر عائلة شيرين أبو عاقلة وكذلك الجزيرة، فضائية الجزيرة، أن ترفع هذه الشكوى وهذه الجريمة إلى المحكمة الجنائية بصفة شخصية وليست من قبل السلطة الفلسطينية. نعم.
For example, Shireen Abu Akleh, the journalist who was killed under the nose of the eye by the IOF, the video confirms that there was no clashes and she was targeted and hit and was killed directly. The Palestinian authorities wanted to go to take the file to the ICC, but there was pressure.
نعم.
Can I just interject? I'm so sorry. I'm conscious of the time.
Reis, just if you allow Mufti to continue, because there is the translation and some difficulties. Just I continue from where the translator stopped. Sheikh Ikrimah want to say that Al Jazeera and the family take the burden and take the case to the international community criminal court, because there was little hesitate from the Palestinian Authority. Yeah, continue. أكمل شيخ إكرمة.
نعم، بارك الله فيك. هناك عدة جرائم ارتكبها الاحتلال وموثقة من خلال التصوير والفيديو بجرائم قتل أناس مواطنين فلسطينيين بدم بارد. نحن نأمل من الفريق المحترم أن يقوم بهذه المهام لوصول الشكاوى ووصول الجرائم إلى المحكمة الجنائية لتقول قولها دون أي تأثير سياسي عليها. نعم.
Yeah.
Yes. There are many international crimes that were documented by video in which Palestinian people were targeted and killed in cold blood. We hope that the legal team can pursue these crimes and submit it to the ICC, and for the ICC to be able to issue its resolutions and decisions without any pressure.
نحن نثق بقدرة هذا الفريق من حيث الكفاءة، ونريد الإرادة القوية الصلبة في الاستمرارية العمل على وصول المحكمة الجنائية الدولية وتقديم الجرائم موثقة لدراستها، وهذا ما نأمله إن شاء الله.
شكرا. نعم.
We believe in the ability of the international team, and we hope it continues their work hard and submit the documented cases to the ICC.
ونأمل أن تكون المحكمة الجنائية الدولية تكون مستقلة في قراراتها، موضوعية، لا تتأثر بأي ضغوطات سياسية تمارس ضدها. نعم.
شكرا دكتور عكرمة.
العفو.
We hope that the ICC would be impartial, reasonable, and would not be subjected to any kind of international pressure.
وشكرا لكم.
شكرا.
Thank you to Salima Yembo. Salima, I hope you can hear me. By way of introduction, you are a French member of the European Parliament, and you've sat there since 2019. And I believe you serve on the Committee for Foreign Affairs and on the Committee for Culture and Education. In 2002, you joined the Committee of Inquiry to investigate the use of Pegasus and other surveillance spyware. Salima, we've had a legal perspective. Can you give us a political perspective and perhaps what you see as being the view from the European Union? As you will have heard a few moments ago, the suspicion really is in part that there are political forces that are stopping these sorts of investigations and these sorts of prosecutions taking place in Palestine. What are your views on that? Salima, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you, but I want to talk translation of your question in French. I think there are one person to translate for me.
Yes.
Yes, I Mohammed, I'm looking to you. As a person that only speaks schoolboy French, I'm not going to be very good in translating my own question, I'm afraid.
No, there is someone who will translate. لو سمحت المترجم.
مريم وزاس مريم.
Okay.
مريم, oui, c'est ça.
Hi, Miriam, can you hear me?
But I can hear you all. I'm just not sure you can hear me.
Yes, I've got you now, Miriam. Let me first of all, obviously, if you pass on our thanks to Salima, and can you ask her to give us her political perspective and what she thinks the view from the EU will be as a result of these recent submissions?
Yeah, sure, I will ask. Alors du coup, il vous demande quel est votre point de vue du point de vue de l'Union européenne sur les persécutions qui ont eu lieu sur la mosquée.
Alors, pour ces persécutions, de manière particulière, il n'y a pas une prise de vue très importante là-dessus pour l'instant. Cela dit, je ne suis pas au Parlement, donc c'est un peu plus compliqué. Par contre, ce que je peux dire, c'est que il y a quand même une prise, comment dire, une impression générale qui fait que j'ai l'impression que le Parlement européen bouge un peu sur tout ce qui s'est passé et comptabilise quand même cette année qui est quand même l'année la plus meurtrière depuis longtemps. Et il y a des choses qui commencent à bouger. Je vous laisse traduire la première partie.
Oui. So she's saying that for now there is not a real movement. She is not herself in the parliament, but there is a general impression saying that there starts to have some things happening, especially since that year, since there is more killing and it's more violent.
Alors, merci. Il est prévu en fait la semaine prochaine, donc c'est une semaine de plénière à Strasbourg, et il est prévu une résolution qui va s'appeler résolution pour la solution à 2 États. Alors, c'est une résolution qui ne me plaît pas réellement parce que ça va être un fourre-tout de plein de choses. Mais bon, c'est la seule chose qu'on a réussi à avoir. Donc, on est content parce qu'on va mettre un focus et on va effectivement, vu que c'est la semaine prochaine, pouvoir parler et ajouter à la liste de choses qui se passent, ce qui se passe sur la mosquée Al-Aqsa.
So she's saying that there is next week there will be a resolution taken called a solution for 2 states. She's not really happy about it since it's going to be a talk with a lot of different things, but at least they're happy that there is going to be a focus on the situation and at least they can talk about it.
Alors, moi, ce que j'ai peur pour cette résolution, enfin, je sais que ça va être une lutte dans tous les groupes politiques et que ça va être vraiment très violent dans les groupes politiques, parce que déjà, juste les quelques discussions qu'on a depuis un mois sont très violents. Mais cela dit, je pense que ça sera, on est obligé de parler de ce sujet à un moment. J'espère que la résolution va être votée, parce que l'idée du Parlement européen, et c'est quand on n'y est pas, on ne comprend pas trop le fonctionnement, mais il faut trouver un compromis avec tous les groupes politiques pour avoir une majorité et pour que la résolution passe. Donc, je sens que la semaine prochaine va être un moment très compliqué. Moi, j'essaie de rassembler le plus de choses pour pouvoir peser un maximum pour avoir une résolution qui colle le plus possible à la réalité, mais je pense que ça sera très compliqué.
So next week she's a bit afraid that it's gonna be difficult because every time when they talk about this topic, there is all the political groups are kind of fighting together. It's quite violent, but she's hoping that it's gonna get somewhere. That anyway they have to speak about this topic. She's hoping for a vote for this resolution, even though it's a bit hard in the European Parliament because they have to have a majority of votes and to have a compromise to be able to get somewhere. But now she's trying to group as much elements as much as possible to be able to have a vote in the majority.
Alors, juste deux petites choses à titre personnel. Moi, j'attends une réponse de la Commission parce que je lui ai envoyé une lettre il y a à peu près 1 mois et demi pour lui demander la position de l'Europe par rapport aux élections législatives qui se sont déroulées en partie dans les colonies, forcément, pour faire voter les colons. Et j'ai fait le lien entre ces élections et la réaction de l'Union européenne qui n'a pas reconnu les élections en Crimée qui avaient été organisées par la Russie. Donc, est-ce qu'on appliquera la même chose et on ne reconnaîtrait pas les élections? Ça, c'est la première chose. Et puis, je vous laisse.
Oui. So months and a half ago around, she was waiting for an answer for the commission. She made votes from the people in Palestine to know their position. And so she's trying to but it was not recognized by the United Europe. So she's hoping that it's gonna be recognized now, but she doesn't know if it's gonna be or not.
Et la dernière chose, c'est que j'étais à Jérusalem et en Cisjordanie le mois dernier. J'étais invitée par une ONG et une ONG européenne. Et notre bus a été attaqué un soir en sortant du village de Taïbé. On a été attaqué par des colons. Ça a été assez violent. On a vraiment très peur. Et donc j'ai interpellé l'ambassadeur d'Israël à Bruxelles au sujet de l'attaque et en ouvrant aussi à tous les Palestiniens qui subissent ça au quotidien. Parce que moi, à la rigueur, je suis rentrée chez moi saine et sauve, mais les Palestiniens vivent ça au quotidien et sont toujours sur place.
She's also mentioning that she was last month she was in Jerusalem and she was violently attacked with the group of people with who she was by Israelis, people living in Israel, and they got really afraid. But she for sure she measured her chance to be able to get back to her home. But she wants to mention it to remember the people who are living there and who are living those attacks regularly.
Voilà, je ne sais pas s'il y a des questions particulières. Enfin, moi, durant ce voyage, même si j'avais lu beaucoup de choses, c'était la première fois que j'y allais. Et sincèrement, on était accompagné d'un membre de Breaking the Silence que je salue, dont je salue le courage au passage. Et puis, on a rencontré aussi B'Tselem et on a pu comprendre réellement sur le terrain le système qui est mis en place, dont aujourd'hui la mosquée Al-Aqsa est juste un exemple, mais un exemple important. Le système qui est mis en place pour récupérer tous les territoires et être dans une situation de facto qui pourrait influencer l'opinion internationale le jour où on arrivera à enfin déclarer l'État de Palestine.
She's asking now if there is any question. She just said that it was the first time for her to go to Jerusalem and to see by herself what's happening there, and her story is an example, and the mosque in Al-Aqsa is also an example. So she hopes that everything can get better and to show in light what's happening there. And so if you have any question for her now.
Et puis, pour la commission, parce que vous avez parlé de la commission Pegasus, dans laquelle je siège, nous avons reçu la société qui est à l'origine de ce logiciel. Et moi, je lui ai posé la question par rapport aux écoutes des Palestiniens et pourquoi ils étaient classés terroristes et surtout avoir la définition du terroriste pour cette société. Et effectivement, ils n'ont absolument pas répondu à ma question. Ils ont refusé de répondre à cette question. Mais ce qu'il faut savoir, c'est que eux ont défini une définition du terrorisme qui leur appartient et qui justifie qu'ils puissent utiliser Pegasus pour espionner des Palestiniens.
The next thing she was mentioning is about Pegasus, that she was part of the Commission for Pegasus, and that was in this software. They have their own definition of terrorism, and that allowed them to spy on Palestine. Although when she asked for it, why was it referenced as a terrorist place, they had no answer to give. There was nothing given for that.
I think, if I may, I'm going to just jump in and pause things there and say, Salima, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us. The Pegasus aspect is another extremely fascinating topic, which I'm sure all of us want to come back to at some point. But for now, I think time constraints mean that we will have to leave things there. So once again, thank you very much for taking the time. I can see that we're joined by Peter Galbraith. Peter, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, I can hear you.
Peter, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Again, I suspect you need no introduction to a lot of people who are watching. You are an author, academic, commentator, politician, policy advisor, and former diplomat. I think you've got the set there, Peter, of things that you've done. in life. Can you give us your perspective on this, and perhaps your the breadth of your experience? I should have mentioned, and again, I suspect people will know this, that you are the former United States ambassador to Croatia, but you've also got enormous experience in the region. What's your take on the next steps and perhaps the political response to these submissions?
Well, thank you for including me. Ahmed is very persistent, even though I do not claim to have great expertise on the Israel-Palestine issue. My expertise is really to the west, as you point out, in the Balkans, and to the east, Iraq, Kurdistan, Afghanistan in recent years. But of course, I've made a number of trips there, and my approach is really to look at this strategically, and to look at the strategy both of the Israelis and of the Palestinians. My first trip to Israel was in 1984, and I had lunch with Abba Eban, and he told me something that I'm sure everybody's familiar with. He'd been, of course, the foreign minister during the '67 war, and he said Israel can be two of the following, three things, but not all three. It can be a Jewish state, it can be a democracy, or it can be Greater Israel, meaning including the West Bank, but it can't be all three. Because it can't be all three, this was, of course, the basis for the two-state solution. You would have a Palestinian state and an Israeli state. But it's clear that the Israeli voters have basically rejected the two-state solution. And it has now elected the most far-right government I think in Israeli history. It will give Netanyahu appears poised to give major positions to a couple of characters who really are beyond the pale. Smotrich, who's a proud homophobe, racist, and also to Ben Gvir, who's been repeatedly charged with hate speech, who had a portrait in his home of the murderer who killed 29 Palestinians in the Hebron massacre. So that's the character of this government. And the way in which Israel has proceeded makes it obviously harder and harder to have a two-state solution. But what does a one-state solution actually mean? In politics, nothing is forever. And sooner or later, there will be a left-wing government in Israel in power with votes of Israeli Arabs. And one of the very things that they're going to do, because it's very logical politically, is to extend the franchise to more and more Arabs, and because that's the way you keep winning elections. And so, if you look over the long term, I think you may end up with a one-state solution, which is not so different from what the PLO envisioned originally, a one-state solution of Arabs and Jews. I know I oversimplify the history here. Called Palestine. Well, we may end up with a one-state solution of Jews and Arabs, which is called Israel, but in substance may not be so different. So much for kind of the broader picture of where the Israelis are. What about the Palestinians? I first got involved in this in the late 70s, early 80s. And early on, I was visited by some Kurdish leaders, including Jalal Talabani, later president of Iraq. And they said, everybody's paying attention to the Palestinian issue. Perhaps we should adopt their tactics. I mean, nobody pays attention to the Kurds, even though, of course, there are 30 million of them, the largest people without their own state. Of course, I said, I'm not sure that that's a good idea. And I wouldn't say that my advice was decisive. That was just not how they operated. But 40 years later, the Kurds are very close to having their own state. I mean, they have their own de facto own state in Iraqi in the north of Iraq, which with their own military, their own government, they were able to conduct a referendum on independence, and they're just steps away from full independence. There's a de facto Kurdish state in northeast Syria. How long that lasts is obviously an open question. And the Palestinian issue has gone from being the central issue that when Americans or the West thought of the Middle East in the 1970s and 1980s to being kind of a third or fourth tier issue. Now, that isn't obviously entirely the fault of the Palestinians, but I think that it does require on the Palestinian part to some rethinking of what kind of strategies are pursued. And I will stop there.
Peter, thank you very much for that fascinating overview and that look back at the things that you've seen in your very, very career. I believe we were planning to have Michael Link join us, and I can't see that he is currently on the screen. Mohammed, I'm looking to you. I don't think we've got Michael there. If he is, no, I suspect not. I don't know if we've got time for a question and answer session at this stage. So I think what I'll do is, Mohammed.
Who is the next speaker on your list?
I think Michael Link, but I can't see him on the screen anywhere. Mohammed, do you want to tell me if I'm wrong on that?
1 minute.
I suspect he's not been able to join us, because if he had, I'm pretty confident that having heard his name half a dozen times now, he would have joined us. So let's draw a line.
This is the last speaker. I think I don't know what happened.
No, well,
this he is the last speaker.
Yeah. So I think given that he's not been able to join us, let's draw a line under things there. Mohammed, once again, thank you for bringing us all together. Thank you for organising today. William, thank you for giving that overview as to these submissions, and everyone else also, many thanks for giving your perspective on those submissions, the political situation and the human rights situation more broadly. I believe that a video of this will be available online, presumably on the AOHR website. But that's it. Good evening to everyone, and we'll draw things to a close there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.